You're online late at night. Nothing urgent, just casually browsing, killing a bit of time. And then you see it. Something you don't really need. But it looks good enough to make you pause for a few seconds. It's not cheap, but it's not outrageously expensive either. And just as you're about to close the tab, your eyes catch a familiar line right under the checkout button. Pay in 4. Just a small payment today. The rest can wait. In that moment, everything shifts. The item no longer feels like it costs what it actually costs. It becomes a smaller number. A softer number. Almost harmless. You're no longer thinking about the total price. You're only thinking about what leaves your account today. And honestly, that number doesn't hurt. It feels less like a financial decision and more like a friendly offer. No interest, no pressure, no sense of debt, just a smarter way to shop. That's exactly why this model spread so quickly. It doesn't show up as a loan. It doesn't speak the language of debt. No one tells you that you're spending tomorrow's money today. Instead, it's packaged as a favor. As if someone is helping you lighten the load. As if you're being treated more fairly, more flexibly, more modernly. And maybe that's why so few people ever stop to ask a simple question. Not a big one, just a small one. How did something that sounds so harmless, so comfortable, become one of the most common ways to pay in just a few years? Why is it everywhere, from clothes and electronics to everyday purchases? When something grows that fast, it's usually not because it's incredibly good for you. It's because it's incredibly easy to say yes to. Dangerous things rarely start by feeling dangerous. They start with convenience, with making things feel lighter than they really are. Buy now, pay later is no different. It doesn't begin with problems. It begins with comfort. And that comfort is exactly what deserves a closer look. What's important to understand is that buy now, pay later isn't really selling you money. If it were just lending, it wouldn't have grown this fast. What BNPL actually sells is a feeling. The feeling of not feeling pain when you pay. The feeling that shopping is no longer a heavy decision. Just a light, almost insignificant action. When you see something priced at $200, your brain immediately recognizes it as a meaningful expense. There's a natural hesitation. A brief pause that's just long enough to ask yourself whether you really need it. But when that same number is split into 4 payments of 50, your brain stops reacting the same way. It no longer sees 200. It only sees 50. And 50 sounds manageable, even easy. This isn't accidental. It's how the human brain works. When costs are broken up and pushed into the future, the discomfort of paying fades. Psychologists call this the pain of paying. And BNPL is designed to reduce that pain as much as possible. You still pay, but it no longer feels like you're paying a real price. When the pain disappears, behavior changes. People stop shopping based on need and start shopping based on what feels affordable. The line between, I need this, and I want this, begins to blur. Items you would have skipped before suddenly slip through your mental filter, not because they became more necessary, but because the payment method made them feel harmless. That's why stores that offer pay later options consistently sell more. Not because customers suddenly need more things, but because when paying feels lighter, buying becomes easier. You don't think you're spending more money. You're just spending more in reality. Buy now, pay later doesn't make things cheaper. It changes how expensive they feel. And when perception changes, behavior follows. That's its real power, and the reason something advertised as interest-free can influence how people spend far more deeply than any interest rate ever could. The problem with buy now, pay later never starts with a single purchase. The first time usually makes sense. A practical item, a reasonable decision, no interest, small payments, everything feels under control. And because that first experience is smooth, there's no reason to be cautious the next time. Then comes the second purchase. Then the third. Each one is small. Each one feels manageable. You tell yourself you'll remember the payment dates. And in theory, you could. But life doesn't run on theory. Work gets busy. Emails pile up. Notifications come and go. Before you realize it, there are multiple BNPL plans running at the same time. None big enough to scare you on their own. But together they start to create pressure. At that point, you're no longer managing spending. You're managing payment schedules. Due dates scattered across the month. Every time your phone buzzes, you pause for a second, trying to remember what that charge is for. Some notifications make your stomach drop, not because the amount is large, but because you forgot it even existed. The sense of control fades quietly, not through one big shock, but through a series of small moments. The most frustrating part is the constant feeling of being short on money. Even though you didn't buy anything big, no luxury vacation, no expensive impulse purchase, just a lot of small, harmless-looking payments quietly draining your account. And because each one feels minor on its own, it's hard to pinpoint where the problem actually is. This is where many people blame themselves. They think they lack discipline, organization, or financial skill, but the truth is simpler. The problem isn't one installment plan. It's too many small ones existing at the same time. When debt is broken down so finely that it no longer feels like debt, it doesn't disappear. It just becomes harder to see. And that invisibility is what keeps the cycle going. Things become genuinely concerning when buy now, pay later moves beyond clothes and electronics. When it starts showing up in places no one ever thought of financing before. Groceries, fast food, everyday meals, things you need to live, not to upgrade your lifestyle. When borrowing slips into decisions this basic, it stops being about convenience. Financing a laptop can be a calculated decision. Financing milk, bread, or a delivered meal is something else entirely. It signals that the line between income and spending is fading. You're no longer spending based on what you have, but on what you can delay. Every meal paid for later is a small reminder that today is being funded by tomorrow. This is especially dangerous for younger people who haven't yet developed strong financial instincts. Growing up in a world where nearly everything can be paid for later slowly rewires expectations. You don't need the money to buy. You don't need to pause and think. The friction that once forced people to reflect before borrowing almost disappears. Buy now, pay later has done something traditional debt never managed to do this well. It made debt invisible. No long contracts. No serious borrowing moment. No pause that forces you to ask whether you've gone too far. Everything is smooth, fast, and light enough that nothing feels wrong. But when debt becomes part of daily habit, the cost isn't just financial. It's the loss of connection between earning and spending. The sense that everything can be handled later, while obligations quietly stack up. When you have to borrow for everyday consumption, the issue is no longer the payment method. It's the structure of your financial life. And that's the moment anyone needs to stop and look more closely. What's interesting is that truly wealthy people rarely speak out against buy now, pay later, not because they don't see the risks, but because they simply don't need it. They don't treat BNPL as an enemy or as a solution. To them, it's just an unnecessary option. And that quiet indifference is the real difference. They operate by a simple, unspoken rule. If something can't be paid for today, then right now, it isn't truly needed, not because they don't want it, but because they value preserving choice for the future. When you pay in full, you're not just buying an item, you're buying clarity, relief, freedom from small obligations that linger for weeks afterward. In that sense, paying in full is a form of freedom. Exiting BNPL doesn't require drama. It starts with calling it what it is: debt. No matter how friendly the name sounds, once you label it honestly, your behavior changes. Stop opening new plans, not out of fear, but because you don't want your future divided into scattered payments. And most importantly, bring purchasing decisions back into the present. If you're not ready to pay in full today, give yourself permission to wait. Many desires fade when given time. Buy now, pay later doesn't take your money immediately. It takes your future freedom, piece by piece, through decisions that seem small in the moment. And once you see that, you don't need to fight it. You just step aside. If you want to continue having calm, thoughtful conversations about money, about building sustainable financial systems and long-term wealth mindsets, staying here is simply a way to not walk that path alone.